This week on Africa Update. The insecurity, which we hoped was a thing of the past before and during the election, has returned. What brought about its seeming pause and current resurgence? Also on the program, the impact of high food prices on Ramadan in Tanzania. And on Roundup, we will also highlight some of the major stories from across the continent. This is Africa Update on Trust TV, reaching you from Abuja, Nigeria's capital. I am Ibrahim Yusuf. Hello and welcome once again. Now, the security situation in Nigeria has been a major concern for the government and citizens alike, particularly in the lead-up to the elections. However, prior to the 2023 general elections, there was a drop in reports of violence, including kidnappings and killings. Lately, however, there's been a resurgence of kidnappings, killings, and wanton acts of banditry in the country, prompting the questions: why and how? In this report, Trust TV gives some insight into the situation and possible solutions.
The recent surge in insecurity in Nigeria has once again brought to the forefront the ongoing challenges facing the country. Despite a drop in reports of violence in the lead-up to the 2023 general elections, there have been several recent incidents of kidnappings and killings, indicating that the issue is far from resolved. The latest incidents include the abduction of 8 students in Kaduna and the kidnapping of 2 members of a family in Kano, underscoring the need for urgent action to address the root causes of the insecurity. The reasons behind this resurgence in violence are unclear, with some speculating that it may be due to the lifting of the ban on old naira notes or the conclusion of the elections. Regardless of the cause, it is clear that the government must take decisive action to ensure the safety and security of its citizens. This may involve a combination of measures including increased deployment of security forces, efforts to address the underlying socio-economic issues that contribute to the insecurity, and an engagement with affected communities to build trust and prevent further escalation of the conflict. One factor that may be contributing to the insecurity is the proliferation of small arms and light weapons across the country. Nigeria has long struggled with the illegal flow of weapons, which fuel conflicts between different groups and exacerbate existing tensions. Addressing this issue will require a multi-pronged approach, including efforts to strengthen border security, disrupt illicit arms trafficking networks, and implement measures to reduce demand for weapons. In addition to addressing the immediate security challenges, the government must also work to promote long-term stability and development in the country. This includes investing in education and job creation to address the high levels of youth unemployment, which has been identified as a key driver of insecurity. It also involves improving access to basic services such as healthcare and clean water, and addressing the underlying grievances that give rise to conflicts in the first place. By taking a holistic approach to addressing the root causes of insecurity, the government can help to build a more stable and prosperous Nigeria for all its citizens.
All right, now joining us to further look into and dissect the insecurity issue is Dr. Kabir Adam, a security expert and consultant. Welcome to Africa Update. All right, so we're talking about the insecurity situation in the country. Prior to the elections, it seemed to have died down a little bit, and during the elections as well. But in recent days, recent weeks, we have seen a resurgence in the number of kidnappings, killings, and of course, wanton acts of banditry across the country. What could be attributed to this?
Thank you, Ibrahim, and Ramadan Mubarak.
Ramadan Mubarak.
Thank you. The common factor in all the incidents that we're monitoring at the moment is the involvement of armed non-state actors. So what that told us is they were there before the elections, and just ahead of the elections, the security deployment was able to limit their ability to move around and to carry out their nefarious activities. However, it appears that after the elections, the spaces have opened up, and they are now able to move around and carry on with their nefarious activities. In other words, we were able to suppress them by the massive security deployment. But sadly, that security deployment appeared to have withdrawn, and now the spaces are open again, and so they are moving around. I mean, in Kaduna, it's the same thing. It was these non-state armed groups. In Zamfara, the same thing. In Katsina, Niger, Borno, as well as Yobe State, it's all these non-state armed groups. So clearly, what we did during the elections and just before the elections was to contain them, keep them in certain places, and sadly now they're out again, continuing with their activities, as it were.
All right, so based on your analysis, it seems like the deployment of security agents actually goes a long way in halting the activities of these bandits. But is it a sustainable measure?
Time and time again, we have seen that it's not sustainable for the simple reason that it's very expensive to maintain that type of deployment. If you pick just one arm of the armed forces, the Air Force, what it would take to sustain the kind of aerial offenses that we saw them carrying out. It's a lot of money, especially now with this high cost of aviation fuel and diesel. Then all the other components of cost that add to those kind of operations, it's very expensive. And as you're aware, Nigeria does not have that kind of money. And that is why we've been advocates of addressing the root causes of these security challenges. And I'm very happy with the report by your correspondent. She identified the root causes of these security challenges, the socioeconomic issues. The other one that I would like to add, which wasn't mentioned in the report, is climate change and the inability of our governments to adapt to climate change. But weapons proliferation, the porous borders, and several other components of this soft approach to addressing insecurity. I would like to see a situation where that gap is closed between the federal and the state government, so that the state government takes some level of responsibility in addressing these root causes, these soft components that lead to insecurity, unemployment as an example, drug addiction, the poverty level and the grievances that exist within communities that provide the drivers, as it were, for this insecurity. It's not only the federal government that can address it, the state governments can play a role. And speaking about that, the incoming administration, if you go through its manifesto, Renewed Hope, that manifesto speaks about addressing some of these root causes of insecurity. So if it goes ahead to implement the things mentioned in that manifesto, then I've got hope that some of these root causes of insecurity will be addressed. But I think the responsibility is on us, the media, civil society organizations, to hold it to account and to make sure that it does implement those things it mentioned in the manifesto.
All right. Well, in talking about the root causes, you mentioned something quite interesting, which piqued my interest. You talked about climate change as a factor. If you leave this, could you expand on it a little bit?
And our inability actually to adapt to climate change. If I use the farmer herder violence as an example, which sadly is at the heart of a lot of the security challenges, it was the farmer herder violence that manifested into things like cattle rustling, banditry, and the several other challenges affecting the north central and northwestern region. Now, climate change affected the quantity or the size of land that both farmers and herders could use for their economic ventures. So in the past, they had enough land, quote unquote, and they fashioned out the means through which each of them was making use of their available land. But because of climate change, the size of that land shrunk. So on the side of the farmer, combined with population explosion, he needed more land, as it were, to farm. And the herder, as a result of the encroachment of desertification, as it were, he's moved inwards into parts of Nigeria from the greater Sahel. And combined with this requirement and desire for additional land by the farmer, you could see the natural consequence for conflict, as it were. Now, you also have to add that to the other components of climate change challenge in the greater Sahel that have led to conflict, which now led to the weaponization of those regions. So as the herder moved downwards into parts of Nigeria, he came with his weapons because already he has experienced conflict in all of that. So there are different ways through which climate change, sadly, is adding to this challenge that we have at the moment. But at the center of it is the inability of government to create adaptive measures to deal with the consequence of climate change. The reality is we cannot stop climate change, at least on this part of the globe. Because a lot of it is really not by us, it's coming from the Western nations. We are faced with the consequence, and so our government needs to put in place adaptive measures to deal with those consequences.
All right. So with our current internal security architecture as it is now, do we have what it takes to be able to curb and curtail the proliferation of small arms and light weapons? Because they seem to be a major contributing factor to the escalation of these insecurity issues. Is there, with the current architecture we have now, can we be able to curb that?
So it is work in progress. Under the Buhari administration, he moved ahead to set up a committee, as it were. I think the idea is to have a commission, and he appointed a retired military officer by name of Diko, who is now domiciled in the office of the National Security Advisor, that is responsible for this commission for mopping up small arms and light weapons. Now, sadly, Nigeria is the only country in the sub-region, West African sub-region, that is yet to have that commission. As far back as almost 15 years ago, the ECOWAS agreed among themselves, countries, to set up this commission. Nigeria delayed it. What Nigeria did was to set up a presidential committee, and that committee, played a role up until for 12 years throughout the Obasanjo administration. It was a committee into the Goodluck Jonathan administration, and then it was during the Goodluck Jonathan administration that, for some reason, the committee was made moribund or stalled. And then under President Buhari, he's now set up. It's a little bit unclear whether it's a committee or a commission, but I know he's appointed this DICO person who is responsible for that. And of recent, we've seen a lot of action by that department that is, like I said, under the Office of the National Security Advisor. Apart from setting up internal structures and regional offices, it has also reached out to neighboring countries. And the result of it is we're seeing a lot of weapons that are being mopped up. And over time, you see the police holding public events where they hand over these weapons to this particular office in the Office of the National Security Advisor. So it's work in progress. What I would hope to see is that the National Assembly passes a law that recognizes the setting up of this commission so that it becomes officially recognized, and it will now have a budgetary provision. It would have an autonomous office and not subsumed under the Office of the National Security Advisor. I think it's a little bit too late for the 9th Assembly, so I'm hoping that especially the those that will be principal officers in the 10th Assembly will listen to this, let them make it an agenda as part of what they will do in the 10th Assembly. There have been attempts under the 9th Assembly to pass more bills, but it's never seen the light of day. I think it's currently in the second reading. Like I said, I don't think it see the light of day under the 9th Assembly. So hopefully the 10th Assembly will pick it up, and we will have a functional commission, autonomous, that would be able to deal with this challenge of small arms and light weapons. And again, before I conclude, it shouldn't be a federal government approach alone. It should involve the state governments.
All right. Well, talking about the governments so to be involved, the states, the federal as well. Is there a need for us to have a stronger regional cooperation between other international partners? I mean, like the partners that we have or our neighbors, so to speak. You made mention of ECOWAS while you were talking about these small and light weapons. Is there a need for us to have a stronger cooperation with these neighbors of ours so that we can be able to stop the proliferation of these arms into the country?
Definitely. A couple of years ago, just before COVID, my consultancy, I run a consultancy called Beacon Consulting, and we did a survey, a commission survey. I would share with you a little bit of the information that we found out. So as part of that survey, we identified the sources of these small arms and light weapons, and almost 80% of the sources are foreign, international sources. So they are gun-running channels that exist through the Sahel region into the porous borders around Nigeria, some of them in the north, others in the southern half of the country through our water bodies and all that, and then sometimes even through our airports. Now, because 80% of the challenge is international, now it shows you how international cooperation would help tremendously in solving the challenge. So because we're lagging behind, even in ECOWAS, sadly, we have a lot to do. Other ECOWAS countries are ahead of us. Even neighboring Niger has set up its commission long before Nigeria has. But the UN too has several organs that deal with proliferation of weapons. So again, apart from these regional multilateral platforms, the global platforms, multilateral platforms, platforms for cooperation, as well as bilateral platforms. So what I mean by bilateral, apart from our cooperation with ECOWAS, we should also cooperate directly with countries like Niger, given the size of the border between us and Niger, Chad too, as well as to an extent Cameroon. So in this regard, because of the nature of the challenge and the size of the challenge, nothing should be off the table in terms of cooperation with international partners.
All right. Well, on that note, thank you very much, Dr. Kabir Adamu, for coming on the show, and of course for those insights into the security situation or the insecurity situation in the country, and of course ways to tackle it. Thank you very much for coming on Africa Update today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right. All right. This is still Africa Update on Trust TV. Coming up after the break. Muslims in Tanzania say food price increases impacting Ramadan. Do stay with us.
Part of efforts to support Africa's goal of strengthening.
Now looking at the activity chart, as you can see right here, a total volume of 130.
Created a Boko Haram crisis that at that time was restricted to Yobe.
How secure are they? You can see security men with blood.
This is the road leading up to the...
Really, if you look at England squad, you are looking at EPL, you are looking at their names. You are not looking at...
Welcome back, and thanks for staying with us on Africa Update right here on Trust TV. Now, as Muslims in Tanzania observe the holy month of Ramadan, they are facing increased food prices and uncertainty of supplies. Now, Charles Kombe spoke to some residents in Dar es Salaam and has this report.
A resident of Dar es Salaam, Zainab Athman looks forward to the month of Ramadan each year as a time to reflect on spirituality through fasting and prayer. But this year, Athman says, has been difficult because higher food prices have made it more expensive to host iftar, an evening meal to break the day's fast.
Prices of goods have increased. Previously, I used to buy rice for 1,800 Tanzanian shillings, but now I have to buy it for more than 3,000 shillings. The money I have is no longer enough due to the high prices of goods.
Athman isn't the only one feeling the pinch. Some families are having to cut back on the variety and quantity of food they consume during the month of Ramadan. Businesses have also been impacted by price increases. This shopkeeper says crop yields on farms were not as plentiful as in years past, which has impacted prices.
The prices are increasing because the farmers do not have a good harvest. So when we go to purchase goods, we only get limited quantities. As a result, we sell these products at higher prices to make a profit.
Like its East African neighbors, Tanzania experienced poor rainfall and delayed monsoons last year, impacting food production and resulting in scarce commodities. High food prices meant that some are having to share iftar meals with neighbors and family members to ease their burden. Others are turning to less expensive food options. Muslims in the country remain committed to observing Ramadan and are finding ways to adapt, says Muslim scholar Swaleh Ibrahim.
We're truly grateful to God. We do not have a large income, only a small one, but with the blessings of the holy month of Ramadan, despite the hardships of life, as we know Ramadan is a blessed month, God blesses the little we have and we can sustain ourselves for iftar and suhoor.
Meanwhile, Athman says she hopes for a more stable food supply, which will make it easier to afford the traditional celebratory iftar meals that unite families and communities.
Charles Kombe there with that report from Dar es Salaam. Right now, let's go for stories happening on the African continent. It's time for Roundup Africa.
The Gabonese National Assembly and Senate met in Congress on Thursday to revise the country's constitution, reducing the term of office of the President of the Republic from 7 to 5 years, and the election from 2 to 1 round. However, the change has been denounced by part of the opposition. With the most recent constitutional revisions in 2018, which instituted a 2-round voting process, the amendments align all mandates at 5 years and return all elections to single-round balloting. According to Assembly Speaker Faustin Bukobi, 85% of votes in the combined session of the National Assembly and Senate in the capital, Libreville, supported the proposal. These changes, in particular the 1-round ballot, have been denounced by part of the opposition, which is currently very divided, as a means of facilitating the re-election potential with a relative majority of the head of state, Ali Bongo Ondimba, who has been ruling the country for over 13 years. Having succeeded his father, Omar Bongo Ondimba, who ruled the oil-rich nation of West Africa for 41 years, in 2009, Bongo, now 64, is generally anticipated to seek re-election. Elections this year for the office of President, the legislature, and local offices are planned for the end of August. However, a date has not yet been set. The Ethiopian government has said it intends to integrate all regional special forces either into the National Army or the Federal or Regional Police, a move likely to be perceived as an attempt to diminish the autonomy of individual regions. Ethiopia's 10 regions currently enjoy a degree of autonomy, ranging from having their own armies to the right to use their own language. Hours before the announcement, local media from the Amhara region, Ethiopia's second largest, reported clashes between national and regional forces brought by a refusal among Amhara Special Forces units to surrender weapons as part of the integration process. In its statement, the government confirmed tensions had risen in Amhara, but blamed it on a misunderstanding of the policy and on fringe groups within the regional force. Amhara forces backed Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's federal troops against rebellious forces in northern Tigray when conflict erupted there in 2020. It is not the first time that unrest has broken out in the region. Zimbabwe's central bank has frozen the assets of 4 individuals who said they assisted a long-running gold smuggling and money laundering ring. The Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe on Thursday said it froze the assets of Cleopas Chidodo, David Chirozvi, Mehudi Dube and Frederick Konaka, who told the Al Jazeera television channel they accepted money to assist a gold smuggling and money laundering ring that has operated for the past 23 years. The 4 men, all Zimbabwean nationals, made the statements in a 4-part documentary series called Gold Mafia that first aired last month. On Thursday, both the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe and the Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission refused to comment on the freezing of the assets or on the Gold Mafia documentary series until all 4 episodes are screened. Zimbabwe's government has been accused of ignoring corruption that is associated with senior officials of the ruling ZANU-PF party. Critics say that corruption is a big reason why the country's economy has stayed in the doldrums for years. Last year, the Zimbabwean Anti-Corruption Commission spent about $33 million investigating corruption, but to date no convictions have been made. And that's it on Africa Roundup.
And that's how much we can take for Africa Update for this week. Now, for this and other programs, you can subscribe to watch us live on YouTube and, of course, follow us across all our social media platforms. I am Ibrahim Yusuf. Thanks for staying with us.